I knocked for late rent. She opened the door naked and blue-skinned. The overdue conversation. The rain hammered against the cracked windows of the old apartment building like desperate fingers seeking entry. Ethan Cross stood on the sixth-floor landing, water dripping from his threadbare jacket, staring at the envelope in his trembling hands. 4 months. 4 months of dodging phone calls, of sneaking past the ground floor office, of shame that tasted like copper on his tongue every time he unlocked his own door. The money inside wasn't even his. 200 borrowed from his bartender friend Marcus, 300 from pawning his grandmother's necklace, the rest scraped together from street performances where tourists dropped quarters into his guitar case more out of pity than appreciation. It still wasn't enough to cover everything he owed, but it was a start. It had to be. Thunder cracked directly overhead, and the hallway lights flickered once, twice, then died completely. Emergency lighting cast everything in a sickly green glow. Ethan took a breath that shook in his chest and climbed the final flight of stairs to apartment 7C. He'd seen his landlady exactly 3 times in the 18 months he'd lived here, once when he signed the lease, once when a pipe burst in winter, and once in the lobby when she'd been wearing sunglasses indoors and a scarf wrapped high despite the summer heat. She was striking in a way that made you look twice, tall, elegant, with dark hair that seemed to catch light strangely, and a voice like wind chimes that made his musician's ear perk with curiosity. Her name was Lyra Indesi, though he'd never been sure of the pronunciation. The name itself seemed to shift in his mouth, like trying to hold mercury. Now, standing outside her door with the storm turning violent around the building, Ethan raised his fist to knock. Before his knuckles could connect with wood, the door swung inward. His breath stopped. Lyra stood in the doorway, and she was violet. Not purple-tinged or shadowed strangely by the emergency lights. Her skin was a deep, luminous violet that seemed to pulse with its own inner radiance, like twilight made flesh. She wore nothing, her body lean and curved in ways that human anatomy echoed but didn't quite match, with slightly longer limbs and a grace that suggested different gravity. Her hair, which he'd remembered as dark, now cascaded past her shoulders in waves of pure silver that moved as if underwater. But it was her eyes that held him frozen, golden amber with no visible pupil, wide with what looked like equal parts horror and desperate relief. They stared at each other. Rain hammered. Thunder rolled. "You're late," she whispered, and her voice cracked on the words. Then, instead of slamming the door in his face, instead of screaming or vanishing or any of the 1,000 things Ethan's spinning mind expected, Lyra reached out with a hand that glowed faintly at the fingertips and grabbed his soaked shirt. She pulled him inside. The door closed behind them with a soft click that sounded like the sealing of fate, and Ethan Cross dropped the envelope of rent money on the floor, already forgotten. Confessions in candlelight. The apartment was nothing like Ethan expected. Where his own studio was cluttered with sheet music and tangled cables, Lyra's space felt like walking into a dream of the ocean. Translucent curtains hung everywhere, moving in a breeze he couldn't feel. Strange crystalline structures sat on every surface, glowing faintly with their own light. The air tasted like salt and ozone. Lyra released his shirt and stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself. The violet glow of her skin dimmed slightly, as if shame could literally darken her. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "The storm, it disrupts the molecular field that keeps my disguise active. I didn't know you were coming. I didn't know anyone would see." Ethan's mouth was dry. His hands still clutched uselessly at air where the envelope had been. What are you?" "Erythian." The word sounded like music. "From one of the crystalline moons orbiting your Jupiter. We've had a hidden colony there for 3 centuries. She turned away, silver hair cascading down her back. Had. Past tense. She moved to the window where rain streaked the glass like tears. Lightning flashed, and for a moment her reflection was perfectly human, dark-haired, olive-skinned, ordinary. Then the light faded and the violet returned. "They came 6 years ago," Lyra continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Harvesters from a corporate fleet. We were mining the ice for water, living peacefully. They wanted the rare minerals in the moon's core. We were in the way." Her hands pressed against the glass, leaving faint glowing prints. "I watched my family's habitat shatter. Watched the ice swallow everyone I loved. I escaped in a shuttle with forged Earth documents and a molecular disguise generator that's been failing for months. Ethan found his voice, though it came out hoarse. Why here? Why this building? Because it's falling apart. She laughed, but the sound was broken. No security cameras. Landlords who don't ask questions. Tenants who keep to themselves. I've been alone for so long, hiding in plain sight, that I'd almost forgotten what it felt like to be seen. She turned to face him, golden eyes glistening. And now you've seen everything, and you're going to run or report me, and I'll have to disappear again. I'm not going to run. The words surprised him as much as her. But they were true. Ethan stepped closer, his wet shoes squelching on the hardwood floor. You want to know why I'm 4 months late on rent? My mother left when I was 8. Just walked out one morning and never came back. My father drank himself to death trying to understand why. I've spent my whole life trying to be good enough, talented enough, successful enough that people won't leave me too. His voice cracked. But I'm failing. Every audition I bomb, every gig I lose, every friend who stops returning calls, it just proves I was never worth staying for. Lyra's expression softened, the violet of her skin warming to something closer to lavender around her face. I came here tonight to apologize for being worthless, Ethan continued. To grovel and promise to do better. But you just told me you lost everything, and you're still here. Still standing. Still trying. He met those impossible golden eyes. Maybe we're both just trying to survive being abandoned. The lights flickered back on suddenly, harsh and bright. Lyra gasped, her skin rippling as the disguise tried to reassert itself, human features flickering over alien ones like a corrupted video feed. She stumbled, and Ethan caught her without thinking. The moment his hands touched her bare shoulders, her skin flared with light. The language of touch. Lyra's violet skin bloomed with luminescence where Ethan's hands made contact, rippling outward in concentric waves of soft radiance like a stone dropped in phosphorescent water. She gasped, not in pain but in something that sounded like recognition, like a word she'd forgotten suddenly remembered. What? Ethan started to pull away, but her hands came up to cover his, holding them in place. Don't let go. Her voice was urgent, breathless. Please. It's been so long since anyone touched me with kindness. The glow intensified, spreading across her collarbones, down her arms, painting patterns that looked almost like constellations. Ethan could feel warmth beneath his palms, and something else, a gentle vibration, like standing near a cello's resonating body when someone played the low strings. On Aerith, Lyra whispered, her eyes closing, we don't communicate the way humans do. Sound carries poorly in thin atmosphere and through ice. We developed something else. Bioluminescence triggered by emotional resonance. We learned to speak through touch and light. She opened her eyes, and they were glowing now too, twin suns in the dimness. When you touch me with genuine emotion, my body responds. It's involuntary. It's honest. Ethan's musician mind understood immediately. Like music made visible. Yes. She smiled, and the light brightened. Exactly like that. The overhead lights gave up entirely, plunging them back into darkness. But they didn't need artificial illumination anymore. Lyra's skin provided its own radiance, soft and lilac-hued, casting dancing shadows across the crystalline structures that decorated her apartment. She stepped back, suddenly self-conscious despite literally glowing. I should find clothes. This is inappropriate. It's beautiful, Ethan interrupted. The words came out more intense than he intended, but he meant them. You're beautiful. Not despite what you are. Because of it. Lyra's whole body flared brilliant violet, bright enough that he had to squint. She laughed, surprised and delighted. You can't just say things like that. Look what happens. But she was smiling, really smiling, and the light settled into a steady warm glow that made her look like she was carved from living amethyst. Can I? Ethan hesitated, then reached out slowly, giving her time to refuse. Can I understand better? She nodded, and his fingers traced tentatively along her forearm. Where he touched, light bloomed and followed, leaving trails of luminescence that faded slowly like after images. Her skin was warm, slightly cooler than human body temperature but not uncomfortably so. The texture reminded him of river stones worn smooth by water. Different emotions create different patterns, Lyra explained softly. Her own hand came up to mirror his touch, fingertips ghosting across his still damp shirt sleeve. Joy spirals outward. Sadness pools and deepens. Desire. She trailed off, a blush somehow visible even through violet skin as pink undertones surfaced like sunrise through storm clouds. Ethan's hand moved higher, across her shoulder, along the elegant line of her neck. The glow shifted, swirling now instead of rippling, forming eddies and currents that spoke of something building between them that neither wanted to name too quickly. "What does this pattern mean?" he asked, voice low. Lyra's breath hitched. Connection. Recognition. The feeling of finding something you didn't know you'd lost. Her hand slid up to rest against his chest, directly over his heart. Through the wet fabric, he could feel warmth spreading from her palm. "Your heart is racing. Yours too." He could see it, a rhythmic brightening at her chest, a pulse of light that matched the drumbeat tempo he knew so well from years of keeping time. They stood like that, hands on each other, breathing synchronized, while the storm raged outside and the world narrowed to just the space they occupied. Ethan had performed for thousands of people, had poured his soul into songs that made strangers weep, but he'd never felt truly heard until this moment, standing in the dark with an alien woman who spoke in light. "I should probably ask," he said, are we? "I don't know what this is," Lyra admitted. "I only know that when you walked through that door, soaking wet and terrified and carrying guilt that wasn't yours to carry, something in me woke up. Something I thought died with everyone else." Her golden eyes searched his face. "I've been surviving, Ethan. But I haven't been living. You make me want to live again." He leaned forward, slow enough that she could stop him, and pressed his forehead to hers. The gesture was human, but her response was entirely Erythian. Her skin blazed so bright they were both bathed in violet-white radiance, and the warmth that spread between them felt like hope, like healing, like the first thaw after an endless winter. "Stay," she whispered against his lips, the word more breath than sound. "Stay with me tonight. Let the storm pass. Let me remember what it feels like to not be alone." Ethan's answer was to close the remaining distance between them, and when their lips met, Lyra's entire body became a galaxy of light, every point where they touched igniting like stars being born, brilliant and inevitable and impossibly right. Outside, thunder rolled. Inside, two lonely souls found language that needed no translation, and the night stretched before them like a gift neither had dared to hope for. The rent money lay forgotten by the door, already irrelevant to the debt being forgiven and the connection being forged in its place. Dawn and danger. Ethan woke to silence. The storm had passed sometime in the small hours, leaving behind that peculiar stillness that follows violence. Grey dawn light filtered through Lyra's translucent curtains, painting everything in shades of pearl and ash. He was alone in her bed, wrapped in sheets that smelled like ocean and ozone. His clothes hung drying over a chair, and for a moment he wondered if the entire night had been a dream born from exhaustion and desperation. Then he saw the faint luminescent handprints still glowing on his bare chest, slowly fading like morning stars, and he knew it had all been real. Lyra stood at the window, wrapped in a silk robe the color of deep water. Her disguise was back in place, human skin, dark hair, ordinary beauty. But Ethan could see the slight shimmer around her edges where the molecular field struggled to maintain cohesion. "You should go," she said without turning around. Her voice was flat, carefully empty. Ethan sat up, the sheets pooling at his waist. "Lyra. Last night was a mistake." She still wouldn't face him. "The storm disrupted my judgment along with my disguise. You saw something you shouldn't have. We did things that complicate everything. It's better if you leave and we pretend none of this happened." He stood, crossing to her in 3 strides, and turned her to face him. Her human disguise couldn't hide the way her eyes, currently brown instead of gold, were bright with unshed tears. "Don't do this," he said quietly. "Don't push me away because you're scared." "I'm not scared, I'm realistic." But her voice shook. "You have a life here, Ethan. Music, friends, a future. I'm a fugitive living on borrowed time." Eventually they'll find me, and when they do. The window exploded inward. Glass and wood rained across the apartment as three figures in dark tactical gear crashed through, moving with inhuman speed and precision. Ethan caught a glimpse of faces behind visors, not human faces, but something angular and sharp, with too many joints in the wrong places. Lyra Indesi of Aerith Colony 7, the lead figure said in a voice like grinding metal. You're wanted for an authorized exodus and harboring classified information. Surrender or be terminated. Lyra's disguise shattered instantly, violet skin blazing as she shoved Ethan behind her. Run, she screamed. But the bounty hunters moved faster. One raised a device that hummed with building energy. Ethan recognized the sound, the same frequency shift that happened right before lightning struck. He didn't think, just grabbed one of Lyra's crystalline structures from the nearby shelf and hurled it with all his strength. The crystal shattered against the hunter's visor. The device discharged wildly, hitting one of its companions instead. The wounded hunter convulsed and collapsed, smoking. The human, the leader snarled. He's contaminated. Take them both. Lyra's hand found Ethan's, and where their skin touched, light exploded outward in a blinding flash. She was pulling him, running, crashing through her apartment door into the hallway. Behind them, the hunters recovered, their footsteps thundering. They hit the stairwell at full speed, taking steps 3 at a time. Ethan's lungs burned, his mind screaming that this was insane, that he should stop and explain he was nobody, nothing, just a failed musician who'd wandered into something beyond his comprehension. But Lyra's hand was in his, warm and real and desperately alive, and the memory of last night, of being truly seen, truly known, was more vital than oxygen. My apartment, he gasped as they reached the second floor. Fire escape. They burst into his cluttered studio. Ethan grabbed his guitar case and the emergency bag he'd kept packed since his father died, the one that held his grandmother's letters and his mother's last photograph. 30 seconds. No more. The fire escape groaned under their weight as they climbed down into the alley. Rain puddles reflected the grey sky. Somewhere above, the hunters were tearing through his apartment, and Ethan felt a strange grief for the life he was leaving behind, small and struggling and safe. Lyra stumbled, her disguise flickering on and off like a failing bulb. I can't. The energy expenditure. I'm sorry, Ethan, I'm so sorry I brought this on you. He pulled her close, steadying her against his chest. Stop apologizing for existing. His voice was fierce, surprising himself. Which way? She pointed east, toward the warehouse district. There's a safe house. Old Erithian way station. If we can reach it, I can send a distress signal to the resistance. Then we run. They ran. Behind them, the hunters emerged into the alley, their inhuman voices echoing off brick and concrete. But Ethan and Lyra were already gone, disappearing into the maze of the city's industrial heart. Two refugees fleeing toward an uncertain future with nothing but each other and the stubborn insistence that some things were worth running for. In apartment 7C, the envelope of rent money lay torn open on the floor, bills scattered like worthless paper. The debt that had brought them together was forgotten, replaced by something infinitely more costly and infinitely more precious, the choice to stand with someone when the world demanded you abandon them. And Ethan Cross, who had spent his whole life afraid of being left behind, discovered that sometimes love meant being the one who stayed, even when staying meant losing everything else. The new harmony. 3 years later, the cabin sat nestled in a valley where the mountains met the sea, so remote that deliveries came by drone and the nearest neighbor was 15 miles through forest. Ethan stood on the porch in the early morning chill, coffee steaming in his hands, watching mist roll off the water like the earth was breathing. Behind him, through the window, he could see Lyra moving through their small kitchen, her violet skin glowing softly in the pre-dawn darkness. No more disguises. No more hiding. The molecular field generator had been destroyed in their escape, and they'd both agreed they were done with masks. The first year had been hard. Sleeping in safe houses, moving every few weeks, looking over their shoulders. The Erithian resistance had helped them disappear, providing new identities and this sanctuary in exchange for Lyra's testimony about the harvesters. She'd spent months in encrypted video calls, reliving trauma, helping build a case that might someday bring justice. Ethan had sold everything that could be traced, his guitar, his equipment, even his name. He was Ethan Cross no longer, just Ethan now, a man who'd chosen love over legacy. Some days the loss ached like a phantom limb. But then Lyra would touch his hand and her skin would bloom with light, and he'd remember what he'd gained was worth more than what he'd lost. He'd learned to compose without performing, writing music on a second-hand keyboard that he uploaded anonymously to streaming services. His songs, strange and otherworldly, had found an unexpected audience. People said his music sounded like memories of places that didn't exist, like longing made audible. He never told them he was writing about love across species, about learning to speak in light, about choosing someone when the universe said to run. The door opened behind him. Lyra emerged wrapped in his flannel shirt, silver hair loose around her shoulders. She pressed against his back, her arms encircling his waist, and he felt the familiar warmth of her skin through the fabric. "You're up early," she murmured. "Couldn't sleep. New melodies stuck in my head." He turned in her embrace, setting down his coffee to free his hands for her face. Her violet skin was cool from the morning air, warming quickly under his touch. "How are you feeling?" She smiled, and the glow brightened. Nervous, excited, terrified. Her hand moved to her abdomen, where the faintest shimmer of different-colored light pulsed beneath the surface. "The medic says it's healthy. Hybrid physiology is stabilizing. Another 4 months if we're lucky." Ethan felt his throat tighten with emotion. A child, half human, half Erythian, an impossibility that was growing more possible every day. They didn't know what to expect, how the biology would reconcile itself, whether their daughter would glow like her mother or have his dark eyes or something entirely new. But they were ready to love her regardless. "She'll be beautiful," he said softly. "Like her mother." Lyra's skin flared brilliant violet, that involuntary response to genuine emotion that still made his heart skip. "You're going to make me glow so bright the drones spot us," she laughed, but she was crying too, happy tears that caught the growing light. They stood like that as the sun rose, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. Ethan thought about the night 3 years ago when he'd climbed those stairs with rent money and apologies, how terrified he'd been of being one more failure in a lifetime of disappointments. He thought about the door opening to reveal impossible violet skin and golden eyes, about the choice that had seemed so simple in the moment. Stay or go, hide or see, fear or trust. "Do you regret it?" Lyra asked quietly, as if reading his thoughts. "Everything you gave up." Ethan kissed her forehead, her nose, her lips, and felt her respond with waves of luminescence that spoke of joy and gratitude and bone-deep love. "I gave up a life I was failing at," he said, "and gained one worth living. That's not a sacrifice. That's a gift." Behind them, the cabin waited, small and warm and theirs. No landlord to answer to, no rent to pay, just two souls who'd found each other across the vastness of space and the barriers of biology, who'd learned that home wasn't a place or a planet but whoever made you brave enough to be wholly yourself. The morning light caught Lyra's skin, refracting through her natural luminescence to cast rainbow patterns across the porch. Somewhere in the valley, birds were waking, beginning their songs. And Ethan, who had once thought music was his only language, now knew there were symphonies written in light and touch, in the choice to stay when leaving would be easier, in the radical act of loving what the world called impossible. They went inside together, door closing softly behind them, and the mountains kept their secrets. Two refugees who'd become a family, a love that defied galaxies, and the small everyday miracle of choosing each other again and again, until choice became nature and nature became home. Lessons from the Violet Tenant. Love requires the courage to be seen completely. True intimacy begins when we stop hiding our authentic selves and trust someone enough to witness our most vulnerable truths, knowing they might stay or leave, but choosing honesty over safety. Home is built through presence, not possession. The places we inhabit matter less than the people with whom we share them. Sanctuary isn't found in security or stability, but in the grace of being fully accepted by another soul.